behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, hath prevailed to open the book, and to loose the 7 seals thereof. And I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the throne, and of the 4 beasts, and in the midst of the elders, stood a Lamb as it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God, sent forth into all the earth. And he came and took the book out of the right hand of him that sat upon the throne.
There we go. Good day. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. I just realized my camera was misbehaving again. It always sets itself back into auto mode, in which it thinks everything should be orange. Apparently it thinks I look like this. So annoying. Okay, let's just, not that I give her a small mammal's rear end what I look like per se, as one could tell. Alright, there we go. A little more, just don't want to have annoying colors. All right, let's read. We're just going to pick it up right here, the Passover, the first Passover. We don't need to recap because there is a lot of repetition. Because he promised to do this, and here it comes. And it came to pass that at midnight the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat upon his throne unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the cattle. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and his servants, and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. And he called for Moses and Aaron by night, and said, Rise up, and get ye forth from among my people, both ye and the children of Israel, and go, serve the Lord as ye have said. Also take your flocks and your herds as ye have said, and be gone, and bless me also. But the Egyptians were urgent upon the people. And the Egyptians were urgent upon the people that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, We be all dead men. And the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading troughs being bound up in their clothes upon their shoulders. And the children of Israel did according to the word of Moses. They borrowed of the Egyptians jewels of silver and jewels of gold and raiment. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they lent unto them such things as they required. And they spoiled the Egyptians. And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot that were men besides children. And the mixed multitude went up also with them, and flocks and herds, and very much cattle. And they baked unleavened cakes of the dough which they brought forth out of Egypt. For it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt, and could not tarry. Neither had they prepared for themselves any victual. Now the sojourning of the children of Israel, who dwelt in Egypt, was 430 years. And it came to pass, at the end of 430 years, even the selfsame day it came to pass, that all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. It is a night to be much observed unto the Lord, for bringing them out of the land of Egypt. This is that night of the Lord, to be observed of all the children of Israel in their generations. And the Lord said unto Moses and Aaron, This is the ordinance of the Passover. There shall no stranger eat thereof. But every man's servant that is bought for money, when thou hast circumcised him, then shall he eat thereof. A foreigner and an hired servant shall not eat thereof. In one house shall it be eaten. Thou shalt not carry forth aught of the flesh abroad out of the house, neither shall ye break a bone thereof. All the congregation of Israel shall keep it. And when a stranger shall sojourn with thee, and will keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near and keep it. And he shall be as one that is born in the land. For no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof. One law shall be unto him that is homeborn, and unto the stranger that sojourneth among you. Thus did all the children of Israel, as the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron, so did they. And it came to pass the selfsame day that the Lord did bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their armies. We'll continue. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Sanctify unto me all the firstborn. Whatsoever openeth the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and of beast, it is mine. And Moses said unto the people, Remember this day in which ye came out from Egypt, out of the house of bondage. For by strength of the hand of the Lord, by strength of hand the Lord hath brought you. I keep putting extra words in. Come on. For by strength of hand the Lord brought you out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. For by strength of hand the Lord... Let's just try verse 3 all over again. And Moses said unto the people, Remember this day in which ye came out from Egypt, out of the house of bondage. For by strength of hand the Lord brought you out from this place. There shall no leavened bread be eaten. This day came ye out in the month Abib. And it shall be when the Lord shall bring thee into the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he sware to thy fathers to give thee, a land flowing with milk and honey, that thou shalt keep this service in this month. Actually, I was JB welding my better glass. These are really, those glasses are from like 6 years ago. These are from like 3 years ago. These are a little better. And the good ones are currently curing. Yeah, we've done. Okay, yeah. Verse 6. 7 days shalt thou eat unleavened bread, and in the 7th day shall be a feast to the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days, and there shall no leavened bread be seen with thee, neither shall there be leaven seen with thee in all thy quarters. And thou shalt show thy son in that day, saying, This is done because of that which the Lord did This is done because of that which the Lord did unto me when I came forth out of Egypt. And it shall be for a sign unto thee upon thine hand, and for a memorial between thine eyes, that the Lord's law may be in thy mouth. For with a strong hand hath the Lord brought thee out of Egypt. Thou shalt therefore keep this ordinance in his season from year to year. And it shall be when the Lord shall bring thee into the land of the Canaanites, as he sware unto thee and to thy fathers, and shall give it thee, that thou shalt set apart unto the Lord all that openeth the matrix, and every firstling that cometh of a beast which thou hast, the males shall be the Lord's. And every firstling of an ass thou shalt redeem with a lamb. And if thou wilt not redeem it, then shalt thou break his neck. And all the firstborn of men among thy children shalt thou redeem. And it shall be when thy son asketh thee in the time to come, saying, What is this? That thou shalt say unto him, By strength of hand the Lord brought us out from Egypt, from the house of bondage. And it came to pass, when the Lord would hardly let us go, that the Lord slew all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beast. Therefore I sacrifice to the Lord all that openeth the matrix, being males. But the firstborn only of my... Where do you get that? You know, it's that O of my that look like only, and that's how bad my glasses are, okay? But all the firstborn of my children I redeem. And it shall be for a token upon thy hand, and for frontlets between thine eyes. For by strength of hand the Lord brought us forth out of Egypt. Again, like the doorposts, you know. The arm, the hands. And it came to pass, when Pharaoh had let the people go, that that God let them not through the way of the land of the Philistines. Led them not through the way of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, Lest peradventure the people repent when they see war, and they return to Egypt. But God led the people about through the way of the wilderness of the Red Sea, and the children of Israel went up harnessed out of the land of Egypt. And Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had straitly sworn the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry my bones away hence with you. And they took their journey from Succoth, and encamped in Etham, in the edge of the wilderness. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, to go by day and night. He took not away the pillar of the cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. Okay. So there we have the initial Exodus along with the ending of the Passover. And we discussed a lot of the aspects of the Passover. I'm going to try to labor not to repeat myself, though, God knows it's worth repeating. And God knows I am difficult. Like the Lord repeats himself and I repeat myself. And there's nothing wrong with repeating a good thing. We don't want to be lost in focusing on one thing. Because you can, like it says, you can tithe the mint and the anise and the cumin, but you cannot neglect the weightier matters. It's good. Like I said, I am very frustrated with the technicalities of people. And like that Christians haven't learned that the letter kills, but the spirit makes alive. Like they can't see that, I'm not saying God is taking a side, particularly in a conflict, but the idea that he is in favor of those that use F-16s to bomb women and children. Like that doesn't strike you as like a somewhat satanic plan, especially in our time. You got to know what spirit you are of, as Jesus warned his apostles. When they wanted to call down fire from heaven, he says, you don't know what spirit you're of. There is a spirit that calls down fire. But you know what? In the days of Elijah, fire came down from heaven. That's true. But it's already been revealed in the book of Revelation that in the last days, the fire of God does not come from heaven. The fire of God comes from the mouth of his prophets. And that's where it belongs. So you can see the source, because the Spirit is in them. When the Spirit is in the most holy prophets, the word that comes forth is fire. And it doesn't have to, like I said, there's all kinds of ways to deal with your enemies. They can be killed metaphorically and literally. But it's God who does the killing. I insist. Because that is, and we've seen this in the book of Acts, when Ananias and Sapphira came before Peter. He spoke, they died. And that's all that it requires. That is what, here's the thing, that's the faith, and the Holy Ghost does what he wills. You may not even realize what's going on. Because the fire proceeds of its own will, because it is the will of him. So here we have, at midnight the Lord smites all the firstborn of the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh and all the cattle, every firstborn. And there's a lot to say about this. And the firstborn. And they make a big deal about it down in chapter 13. I'm going to wait to talk about that more extensively till we get there, okay? Because I want to just kind of move through the rest of chapter 12. And because I know we're going to talk about that firstborn, so I'm not going to get hung up on it just here. All right, so Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians. There was great cry in Egypt. There was not a house where there was not one dead. And he called Moses and Aaron by night, rise up and get out. Just like the Lord had said, right? Just as he had said, he's going to push you out. He's going to be like, get out, be gone, and bless me also. Because he has even lost his own firstborn son. It doesn't go into great detail about it, but it says right there in Pharaoh's house, his firstborn, which is usually the heir. Not in all cases, of course, like Jacob. And oft times kings have decided to take from their sons the most excellent one for the heir, which makes a lot more sense to me. I understand, when you see those emperors who had like 50 wives, I get it. He's playing the son lottery. He's looking for a good son who could be a ruler of the people. I use those words with a wink to my wife. Because, like I've had 8 children and 7 sons, and they come with different skills and talents, and if you're a king, if you only have one son, what's the chances that he's going to be, as good a leader as you? Well, there's some chance, but it's no guarantee. Maybe he's a better man. That's rare also. Whatever outcome you have is going to be rare, because each human individual is quite a rarity. When you think about it, the individual is so rare as to be one of the rarest things. You think about it, there's only one of each. Even when you have 2 twins, they're different individuals. Anyways, but they're so they are quite similar, true. Okay, get out, take your flocks and your herds. The thing he was trying to hold back on, the kids, that's all out the window. He is thoroughly convinced. He was urgent. The Egyptians were like, because they were like, we're going to be dead. We're dead. we'd be dead. We still use that. Like, I remember as a teenager, you'd be like, we're dead, man, we're dead. They're going to get us. When you're in trouble, we're dead. But they mean it. We thought we were being facetious and hyperbolic. They saw the writing on the wall, unlike, I love all the different phrases that come from the Bible, like the writing on the wall, from Daniel, of course, and Belteshazzar. And the people took their dough before it was leavened, and we expected that, and they're kneading troughs. I'm going to look at that word real quick. I'm guessing it's going to be a perhaps, because they're like some sort of kitchen implement or something, some sort of technical name for it, probably. The Exodus begins, that's where I said. All right. I went too far. Oh, there we go. Dough and the kneading troughs. Perhaps kneading trough. Okay, I'm not going to look into it. They're the necessity things. It's like taking your frying pan. You just grab the stuff you need to make breakfast and go. That's how urgent it was. It was a sudden, let's go. And they had to go while the getting was good, right? Because we will see, and we already know that Pharaoh's going to have a change of heart again. His heart's going to be hardened. He's going to try to take them back. Of course, we know how that spectacularly fails in the Red Sea. And the people took their dough. We read that. And but that's interesting. You bound up their kitchen implements and their breakfast dough, basically, the dough for the day, because they made their bread every day. And that's something that's probably a good idea, to make your own bread. My wife makes a good deal of our own bread. Certainly, most of our baked goods are homemade. And I do recommend that. There are so many bad things put into mixed products. A lot of things that are very unhealthy for the human body that are being classified as food that are really long-term side effects and all that haven't been really looked at yet. And they're coming to light. And so you're better off with, avoid those seed oils. And if I didn't mention that there was poison out there, I don't, I like olive oil. It's a blessed thing from ancient times. And there's, make sure you get the organic. I used to think that stuff was like, but I do favor that now. I'm telling you that. Because the things we eat, why do you labor for that which is not bread? And a lot of what we're eating is not. I used to just, not thinking. And hey, I tell you what, until there's a certain, I don't want to say, here's the thing. Will God protect us from the consequences of the things we don't know about? Not always. We can be killed by pollutions and poisons. If it isn't affecting, I want to make my, I don't know. I don't know if this is, sometimes I feel silly, but I like to think, I know God doesn't need me, but I want him to have this attitude, he doesn't want to start over somewhere else. So I want to make myself a valuable servant to him. So preserving me is an idea he thinks that I want to preserve that. I don't want Paul dying prematurely. I won't let that poison hurt him, but knowing when something isn't good for you, you should not continue to do it. Obviously. That's why, for example, smoking cigarettes per se is not really much of a sin. The high and stimulation you get off of it wears off after the first couple times. And then you pretty much just have to smoke to feel normal. Well, that kind of bondage always bothered me. That's why I quit. Because I don't like having something that I need to do that's going to prevent me from serving God. I need to be talking to God, but I'm so freaked out because I need a cigarette. So I did put that away. I don't talk about that too much because that was one of the hardest things ever to quit. But let's say it wasn't that hard, but it required laying on the couch for 3 days. And finding 3 days where you could just lay on the couch, not always easy. Especially if you're a man with a family. All right, I'm just getting into talking about that. But to me, I guess as I say that, I'm thinking about coming out of sin, coming out of Egypt. And also about, as I was listening to this, they borrowed the gold and silver as it was told. It's all typological. And we're going to talk more about that. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians so that they lent unto them the things such as they required. And I could look that word lend up again, but it just means to give. I guess they like to say lend. I don't think the Egyptians, there was this agreement between them and the Egyptians, we'll bring it back. I just think that this is the way the King James chose to translate it. Lend me a cup of sugar, and you don't think that, what it means is in the future, if you need a cup of sugar, come see me. So it's not exactly that. And the journey from Ramses to Sukkoth, about 600,000 on foot, that were men. That's a lot of people. A lot of people dispute that number. And here's the thing. Numbers are about the most disputable thing in the Bible because of the way numbers are written in Hebrew. The numbering system is not quite right. And from the Septuagint to the Masoretic text, there are several places where numbers are off. Like where they're just different, and it's two different versions of the Bible. Which one is right? You know, and for some people, that's like a huge stumbling block. Like the little cracks in the Bible. I know Bullinger tries, in this, he tries to make it like there's no cracks or anything, and that's fine. Well, he doesn't quite. No, he has verses where he'll say, like, these verses don't belong. And I know, and like I said, in the Word of God, if we were to look at in the heavenly sense, there are no cracks, of course. But in the script, but as delivered to man in the containment of that book, men have made errors that are not important. And that's why I say about those things, endless genealogies, worrying about how many Israelites there were. If that's an unrealistic number, then it was probably a copyist error. It's not like a lie or anything. It's just some sort of copying thing or whatever. It's just the perfect thing to get. You know what I'm saying? Numbers are just the thing to be lost in that because of the way, because they didn't have numerals like we do. And like I said, there are examples of this. There's a place in Judges where it was like there was a number that was just way out of line, and there was an explanation of like, actually this should be different. If we get there, we will talk about that. But anyways, I'm not too worried about this. That's fine. And there was, because that's just the Israelites, and just the men, not the women, the men and women and children. That is a lot. And a mixed multitude also went up with them. That's another thing. A mixed multitude. From the beginning. I always wondered what they, of course that's going to be what? I don't know. Egyptians and other strangers who want to be with them or join them? I don't know. There was also a mixed multitude, which is really, again, when I remember back in the day when I used to study with Arnold Murray, like that would be to him like a red light. There were foreigners amongst the Israelites polluting the pure bloodline, and he didn't talk with that particular Southern accent, and I hate doing that. I'm sorry. But anyways, but he was very much on that pure bloodline of it. But like there is no such, the closest thing would be the Levitical priesthood because they were very strict. But actually, as you read this, you realize, the being an Israelite was ethnic and religious. It was not merely just, oh, this is our race. We're a proud. God never talks to them like that. It's about, you're the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the heirs. It's about because servants can inherit. In according to the Hebrew law, and also as far as the customs that Moses even followed, his servant was going to be his heir, and so it's not like this. It's not so strictly just bloodlines and stuff. There's more. They're allowed to marry women from other, like I said, David's, I think his great grandmother or great great grandmother was a Moabite. A Moabitess. It would, because it was more about the males actually, but. What's interesting to me is that the Jews consider it matrilineal. Like your mother had to be a Jew. Which in the Old Testament always seems like the opposite. I see like the patriarchs, they all had to take wives that weren't Jews. They weren't Israelites. So every single one of them. And somewhere along the line, I guess the Jews decided it was matrilineal. Okay, And maybe it has to do with that opening the womb thing or something. I don't know. We'll get to that because we're going to get to 13 in a minute here, and we'll start talking about that aspect. The 430 years, right? They dwelt in Egypt 430 years. That number is pretty solid. It's quoted in the New Testament. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years. And there seems to be, sometimes people have disputes about it. There's a appendix in the back of the Companion Bible. I don't like that aspect. Like I said, I'm not into that technical. I like to get to the spiritual, the things that actually affect us. So let's keep going. The hosts of the Lord, the armies of the Lord, because they are an army, and there's no way to avoid it, to think about it. And if you think about it as 500,000 people, let's just accept that number. And I don't, like I said, I'm not, like I said, if it seems like a lot, okay, I guess it seems like a lot. I don't know. As far as like 400 years to go from 12 It's hard. The thing that gets me is like the 500,000 men. Wow, that's a lot of men. Considering there's going to be what, at least as many women of the same age, pretty much. So it's about 1 million plus what, and it doesn't count children. So what portion of their population are children? Oftentimes the population is kind of like a pyramid, and that you want to have a lot of youth at the bottom. And the Israelites are a growing, burgeoning people that are going to, take over a whole land. So they have to be growing. So that the children would have to make that number even huger. And so whatever. But anyways, they are an army in any case. And then he talked about the war. That comes much later, but we'll talk about the army aspect more when we get down to that. It's a night much to be observed of the Lord. The night of the Lord. I like that term. I remember Arnold Murray had a tape called The Night of the Lord, but it inspired me as I thought about it, as he said, the night of the Lord. That's actually down further. But we also kind of pass through a night. You can see in Revelation the sun darken and all these things, and I'm trying to think about the day shone not for the third part of it, and the night likewise. But also, there's a metaphorical idea of going through the night. Watchmen, what of the night? The day cometh, and also the night. There is a time of light and a time of darkness. There are dark times that come on the earth. And that's why I talked about this night of the Lord. It was a night, but it was quite a night because the death angel passed among people. And there is a death coming. I have no doubt. The end times are a deadly time. It says a third of the people are going to be killed, which is, that's like crazy. For to slay the third part of men. Now, to say that they should be slain, does that necessitate that they will be slain? Well, that is not always the case, because sometimes the Lord sets in motion something like, all right, your job is to kill a third part of men. That's what you're going to do. Or that's what you are supposed to do. That is your mission, so to speak. But does it? I expect it. I do. So, but I'm also laying out the possibility that there's other ways to look at that. Especially when you're talking about these prophetic type things. This is the ordinance of the Passover. Okay, then it goes into the law of the Passover. So let's look at that in detail. We'll talk about the night of the Lord a little more because that's still coming, that phrase. The context that makes more sense. All right, so they're no stranger. The Passover is not for non-Israelites, or Jews if you prefer. They weren't called Jews at this time. They were the children of Israel. Jew only came to be the name they were known by when the kingdom of Judah was separated from Israel. And then, the people of Judah, and they became the kingdom of Judah, and then they were called the Jews for short. But they still thought of themselves as Israel, by the way. And they later also came to think of themselves as Jews, of course, because that's what everyone calls you. You get used to it. When people call you a thing, because I doubt that was a name they came up with. That's something that was attached, and then they were like, who are you? Well, we're Jews. Oh, we know who Jews are. Right. You're from the kingdom of Judah. Right. If they say Israel, they'd be like, what, the people of Omri? No, we're not from Omri and from Samaria. We are from Judah. And so there became a distinction. But not that there is a distinction in the Lord, so to speak. I mean, there is, yes, but like I said, the Jews are also Israel because the remnant of those tribes also returned to Judah. And you see them in the New Testament, in the book of Acts. You see people from different tribes described there. From Asher, and I believe also there was a woman of the tribe of Asher, and of Zabulon. And of course, Paul is from Benjamin, but Benjamin was part of Judah anyways, we knew that. So no strangers, every man's servant that is bought with money, meaning not a hired servant. A foreigner and a hired servant will not eat thereof. When you were to circumcise him, and then they could eat the Passover. Many years they didn't keep the Passover. You know that? Many years they didn't circumcise their sons. There's like a big thing where they have to circumcise them all again. Because they don't follow the rules. And I get it. I mean, I didn't want to circumcise my kids, and I didn't because I don't have to. Except for the ones that was recommended by a doctor when they were older. Because we didn't understand how to maintain the things, I guess, or whatever. Anyways, But if you had a hired servant that was bought for money, he shall eat. You make him. You see what I'm saying? Like when they had slaves, when they bought, someone comes through trading slaves. Let me tell you, you hope a Jew buys you in the Old Testament, at least under their law, if a law-abiding Jew, let's say that. You would pray to be sold to a law-abiding Jew. I'm not saying they did. I'm just saying from my perspective, if I was going to go into slavery in the Bronze Age, I would want to go to slavery under the law of Moses, honestly. Because I sure as heck wouldn't want to go into slavery under the law of the Romans. I would rather have it under the law of the Israelites, because they had some really, what would I call it? Just this, for example, just including them, they are part of you now. You bought them, you circumcise them like they're one of you, because your bought slaves are part of your country. They're part of Israel. They're to be circumcised and they eat the Passover. Because often servants become as you. I mean, look at all the black slaves brought over. They're part of our country. Unfortunately, because of racism, it's been very difficult to integrate them. Because seriously, we could have integrated them much better a long time ago if it wasn't for the fact that the whole thing was possible because of racism. Because it's easier to make people slaves who look so different from you. I guess. I mean, whatever. It's true. They stopped enslaving white people and they went to Africa, and where there was already a market. I mean, we didn't create the slave market in Africa. That was created by Muhammad. Yeah, there's videos on that if you question that. That's not my area of expertise, though. A foreigner and an hired servant shall not eat thereof. In the one house shall it be eaten. Thou shalt not carry aught of the flesh abroad out of the house. You do it in the house, like in Egypt. Like you don't leave the house because the death angel is abroad. You stay inside. And also neither shall you break a bone thereof. Why is that? Well, I know that Christ, it says, not a bone of him was broken. None of his bones were broken on the cross. They were about to, but they saw he was already dead. They wanted to hasten it. I'm not sure what that's. I'm going to think about it. What does that mean symbolically? Well, I guess because Christ, in that he was, he died, but his bones weren't broken. Bones to me are strength, right? I need to have strength in my bones and not weakness. And so I thought, his strength is not broken even in death, maybe. I don't know. So that's a speculation. All the congregation shall keep it. Everyone. When a stranger shall sojourn with thee, and will keep the Passover till, I mean, they're living with you, and I want to keep the Passover. Let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come. Let him do, but see how, this isn't like, he is not of our race. You must exclude him. No. If a stranger will, they can keep the Passover too, but they must be circumcised. Now in the New Testament, you notice, they were very clear in saying Gentiles do not have to be circumcised. You know why? Because as I went over very clearly last week on Friday, this law is void because Christ brought something that exceeds it. Christ's sacrifice, Christ's Passover is so much superior to killing a poor animal and doing all these ritualistic things that it is no longer in play. It's out. It's gone. It's done away. The glory of it is all gone. It's glorious. It's a schoolmaster. I learn from it. I meditate on it. I go back to Exodus. I read it again. I thank God. I praise God for his wondrous works of old. And I listen to this, and I think about the law and how he would do this, but it doesn't ever make me think, I better be circumcised, even though I guess I am. But never thinks, I got to circumcise all my kids so they can have Christ, because we know we don't. And here's the thing. Like any person, I remember we did a Seder at a Bible study. And, and I don't have any problem doing that, except if you aren't circumcised, it's entirely inappropriate and you're not keeping a Passover. You're actually kind of defiling it because that's not how you keep the Passover with uncircumcised genitals. You don't. That's wrong. You must be circumcised to properly keep it under the law. Now, of course, in Christ, you're not giving offense to God. I'm just saying, if you're trying to be legalistic, if you're trying to follow this as like, this is part of my walk, this is what I need to do to be saved, I have to keep the Passover. I have to keep the Sabbath. I got to be circumcised. You're going back into bondage, back into Egypt, quite frankly, which is a weird thing because it's like, here's the thing. The Lord called them out of bondage so that they would serve him. And the thing they served him through was the law. But the law also subjects you to a different kind of bondage. I will be your God and you will be my people. They're circumcised and mark them off as belonging to God. That's why he punishes them. That's why he deals with them in the particular ways he does. He punishes them for sins that other nations would get away with. Like as far as God will let live in peace, the heathen that worship idols, they don't know any better. But Israel does know better. They have the law and they must keep it or the Lord will make them, he will punish them. He will give them the stripes and chastisement of a son. And that's collectively. As individuals, there are people who are cut off for wickedness. Just read Isaiah. All the prophets having to do with the captivities and see what they were saying about why we are going into captivity. Why are we going into captivity? Why are you going to get killed? Why is that happening? Well, because they didn't keep the word of the Lord. That's why, to me, it's like to keep the word of Christ and the apostles is to keep the word of the Lord. And therefore, I reject circumcision. I do not observe Passover feasts. Christ is my Passover. So I do keep the feast, not with the old leaven of wickedness and malice or some other two bad things. Malice and wickedness, I think it actually is. But whatever. I keep it not with that, but with the new leaven of sincerity and truth. That's my sincerity and truth. So I can't be like, oh yeah, you know what Jesus really wants us to do? He really wants us to give more 2,000-pound bombs to Israel so they can drop them on women and children. That's what he wants us to do, right? That's what he wants. That's what God desperately. That's what Jesus wants Christians to support. And I'm like, how can we be so blind and say that in doing evil we can make good come? But we got to fulfill prophecy. We're going to force prophecy to be fulfilled with our F-16s. You're participating with Satan in an evil deed, is my opinion. When you're participating in murder, you're most probably, unless God has directly ordered you, you're probably being presumptuous and you're in danger, quite frankly. Because like I said, if God allowed me to harden my heart such that I thought I could murder people, I would be in, oh God, have mercy on my soul and turn me from such evil. So the strangers were allowed, but like I said, it's not something I personally keep or follow or will allow it to oppress me because it becomes oppressive now with legalists. But see how gracious it is to the stranger, but no uncircumcised person, because just like us, we must be circumcised in the heart. That's why we don't have to circumcise our flesh, because in Christ, our heart has been circumcised. And I think that how is your heart circumcised? I think that when we have our eyes opened, when God genuinely reveals the lordship of Christ to us, that we could say that he is the Christ, as Peter did, and declare that thing. And to me, that is to have, I think, that is a sort of a circumcision, like opening things up. I don't know. Removing the blockage. I don't know. It's not blockage. I don't know the excess. Making us like I don't know. Because the idea of circumcision to me is the idea that when I say my heart is circumcised, or I circumcise my heart, there are certain things of the flesh that dwell in my heart that my heart desires. You know what I mean? There's fleshly parts of my heart. Oh, let's have a savory meal. Oh, let's have love making. And some of that is, there's no sin. The marriage bed is undefiled, and we must eat, and it's okay if it tastes good. You don't have to eat all things that taste bad. But it's also good to do without. And certainly not to do to excess, And And not to become so obsessed with flavors and food that it becomes a stumbling block to us. And not to be so enamored of love and sex that we fornicate and sin. And to me, circumcision is knowing that, like, I have to cut off from myself these fleshly things that interfere with my spiritual life and coming to God. You know, that's the importance of circumcision to a Christian. It's like we put off the old works of the flesh. And that's where it's at. Because, like I said, that's part. I guess so. I would say circumcision, when you come to Jesus, it's kind of like your repentance. I would say that's a pretty good. It's involved with repentance, because it's saying, like, I need to do this to be right with God. You know, I need to do this to be right with God. It's what you need to do to be right with God. That's a great way to put it. It's the action you need to take to put yourself in good standing with God. Now, for us, that is putting your faith in Jesus. But that's a big question. It's not involving a lot of things to do, but it is a lot to understand. You know what I mean? Because very often, like I said, it's very easy for people to think, like, I just got to have the secret password. I know Jesus is the Christ and he's risen from the dead. I believe that. Can I come in now? And I can say that, but God knows if I really believe it. Because he will know, because he will have revealed it to me. I said, when I was young, it was an assumption of my life. I don't know when I came to faith. And perhaps the Lord always regarded it as such. Or perhaps it was when I turned to him, when I decided to serve him. I don't know. It always seems sincere. My faith ebbed and flowed. Because faith is not just a binary. You either have it or you don't. That's not what I ever see. You know, great is your faith. Oh, ye of little faith. Jesus isn't saying ye have no faith, though there are those who are. No one has no faith. Everyone has a little, but sometimes there's no faith in God, or no faith in this, or no faith in that. But they put faith in other things. They don't know where their faith ought to be put. So thus did all the children of Israel. But again, I almost missed that verse. That's a very important verse. Last time I pointed out, one law to him that is homeborn, and unto the stranger that is sojourn among you. And again, I think they mean homeborn slaves and such, right? Homeborn slaves. It could, but also there are other again, so I may have taken that equality on the law a little too far. Because obviously there are different rules for Israelites than there are for strangers, as far as like how to participate in this feast. Though truth be told, Israelites weren't supposed to be uncircumcised in keeping the Passover. Everyone, right? No uncircumcised person shall eat thereof. So the rule does apply to all. So maybe I'm being a little bit, maybe I'm taking, let me take that word homeborn and make sure, maybe I want to make sure how much liberty I got there, right? One that is born in the land. Oh, that's different. One law should be homeborn. Ezrach, a native. So that's, let's see, well, I'm going to bring it up. Well, I brought it up, so I might as well just show you. A native, it says, Ezrach. And Strong says, from Zarak, in the sense of springing up, a spontaneous growth. That is a native. So I think that actually is not just, I don't know if he's differentiating between Israelites and all strangers. Well, stranger is a foreigner, right? Now, someone who lives with you and is born among you may still be a stranger, especially if they haven't been circumcised. That's why he says, let them be circumcised with all their male. So the foreigner or anyone born in the land must be circumcised to keep the feast. And that applies to all. Oh, okay. And that's sort of equal protection under the law. There is quite a bit of that in the law, as we will find. It wasn't supposed to be like, okay, well, murder is wrong for an Israelite, but I mean, that wouldn't be a good one, but it's okay for a foreigner. No, what I mean is, an Israelite can get divorced, but a foreigner can't, or something like that. I don't. But they wouldn't consider that like the government's sort of prerogative. If a foreigner wanted a divorce, I don't think they'd care at all. As far as they wouldn't think of it as like they have to keep our law, because their law is a law of their country, but it's also a personal law for each individual to follow. You know, unlike our laws, which are more about what you can't do, there are many things in the law of Moses which are things you must do, things you are obliged to do. How many? We have some obligations, and they're usually in the form of things like taxes, right? Those are obligatory, as far as they want to oblige you. Even if you feel you're not obliged, they certainly want you to be obliged and pay your taxes. Military service is often obligatory. What else is obligatory? Not voting. Not hardly anything I can think of. That's why we're a free country. How many obligations do you have? That's a good measure of your freedom. If you have, as far as now, here's the thing. Like I said, I talk about freedom. In God, I don't look for freedom. In God, I am a servant. I'm a slave. That's when people talk about slavery. I'm like, they're like, I remember this guy said the only prophet of a major religion that didn't own slaves is Jesus. He was talking Muhammad owned slaves, Abraham owned slaves, Moses, they claimed owned slaves. I'm not sure about that, but Moses certainly wrote all kinds of laws permitting you to own slaves. Not permitting so much as governing the fact that people would buy slaves, even though they didn't keep the laws about slaves or any of that. But God put a law in place that should have remedied all the wrongs. Now, see, what if there was no law, just a law outlawing slavery? Well, then they have slaves. But there's nothing except, well, you've broken the law by having a slave. But then by adding to law and governing that thing that men do for the hardness of their hearts, it becomes even more sinful. It creates even finer gradations of sin upon it. And what's funny is I was arguing with this one guy. He was saying, the Bible never says that slavery is evil. I'm like, you're out of your mind. Are you kidding me? I was like, I immediately brought him a verse from Genesis where Joseph said, basically, the evil that you did to me, God purposed for good. And what was the evil they did to him? They sold him into slavery. That is evil in the Bible. From Genesis, they know it's evil. Just like divorce is evil. And I made that same point. Divorce and slavery are evil. God permits both. They're evil, not in every sense, though. Like I said, when I'm God's slave, I don't consider that slavery evil because he's not an evil master. But being sold into slavery against your will, that is an evil come upon you. That's a disaster. I am willingly selling myself to Jesus. I say, take me, pay for my sins, and I'll serve you forever. That is a willingness. He's saying, well, if you come and serve me, I'll pay for your sins. I'll be your Lord. You be my son. Believe in me. Serve me. All you have to do is believe to be saved. But if you don't follow on to serve, I don't believe you. If you don't serve the one who saved you from such a death, then I have no respect for you as someone who has been similarly rescued. I think if you refuse to serve, you disgust me. And I promise you, the Lord will not honor your little claim and your technicality. Oh, well, technically I believe, and I won't do anything. I just want to prove a point. I'm not going to get baptized. I'm not going to follow the law. I'm not going to follow the law of Christ either. I'm just going to do whatever I want, except I'm going to continue to believe that Jesus rose from the dead and confess his name. I figured out the loophole. I can do whatever I want. I can sin and sin and sin, and grace will abound. You're a fool. God will not be mocked. He is not a letter of the law God. He is a spirit of the law God. And that's why I say people stumble over it. In the days of Jesus, they stumbled over it. And they stumble at it now. They say, they need to be in that land. That's the land God promised them forever. Bam, bam, bam. And I see Christians rallying, Christians cheering it on. That's what they get. That's what they deserve. Boy, are we treasuring up wrath against the day of wrath or what? The only thing that makes me not actually terrified for what is coming upon our nation, for all the sins we have committed over the decades, is the fact that I trust in the Lord's protection. It's like, yeah, I can suffer, but I won't suffer beyond whatever. I'm ready to suffer for the sins of my nation. Willing to take it on. Because, for many years, I just kind of blindly and blissfully didn't pay attention and let all these things. Yeah, I knew there were some bad things going on, but I was like, I had more important things. I got heavenly concerns. I got to read my Bible. That's all important. It's all important to read your Bible, but don't be like the guy. I'm a Levite. Oh, I'm reading my scriptures. Oh, there's an injured person on the side of the road. Well, the scripture says, don't touch a dead body or you'll be unclean. I don't want to be unclean. Oh, pass the other way. I'm gonna go. Yeah. And that's what Christians are like when they look at the suffering of people in the world, in America, and they say, well, there's people, blah, 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 blah. Who cares? But what, while we're all, I was walking through Walmart, man, and everyone is fat. They're all fat. And I tell you what, I've mostly, the weight I've lost the past year or so, it's almost completely from change of diet. So I'm going to try to start exercising again. Not that I don't get exercise every day. I walk a heck of a lot because I have a big property and I'm always walking all over the place doing things. And I get that. More heavy exercise, getting back into my heavy exercise regimen. I like to say it on the Bible study because that makes me feel like, no, I got to go do it. If I don't say I'm doing it, then I don't have to do it. That sometimes gets hard. It'll be hard today with a broken toe, but sometimes you got to go anyways. How'd you break your toe, Paul? The Lord's chastisement. That's wow. And it came to pass the selfsame day. They bring them out of Egypt by their armies. By their armies, I believe, means they kind of came out in their tribes. And they were, they still had that differentiation among them. The tribe of Judah, the tribe of... So like I said, they knew who they were. Moses is not coming to a people who are absolutely void of understanding. Like when he says, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they're like, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And just as you notice probably at the end of the chapter 13, they took the bones of Joseph. They knew about them. They kept them because that is how they, I guess from ancient times, the Israelites practiced, and even to the time of Christ, they practiced something called secondary burial. But I'm not going to talk about it too much right now because we're finishing. That's at the end of chapter 13. We got to get into chapter 13, and I have no time. That astounds me. I felt like I was in the first 20 minutes of my Bible study. So now we get to this issue of the firstborn. I only have 9 minutes to talk about it. That stinks. Oh, well. We'll have to talk about it over the course of a couple of days. So the whole time, I thought I was rushing through those 20 verses. Not necessarily rushing. Well, we had the laws, right? We had to talk about that. We can't skip on that. Sanctify to me all the firstborn. Whatsoever openeth them. We have more than 9 minutes. We'll take longer. Don't worry. Whatsoever openeth the womb among the children of earth, the first to come out is mine, he says. And that sort of means like, how do you give something to God? Well, you give it up, basically, right? As Abraham was willing to give up Isaac. That's how you give it to God. And that's why he says they shall be redeemed. When something comes out of the womb, what he's saying here is all your firstborn deserve to die. That's why this exists. Because, you come out here and says, oh, those Egyptians, they deserve death. Why was there blood over the door of the Israelites? Why could not God not make a difference that time without that? When it came to all the other plagues, it was all directed at the Egyptians. But why at the end, in the death, why couldn't he just say, the death angel will pass, but it won't go anywhere near the children of Israel? Why not just that? Because there was nothing about them that made them unworthy of that death. They were sinful as the Egyptians. It's just they happened to be the ones who were enslaved, and God had promised their father and all that to bring them out alive. So in order for them to not be killed, the blood had to be put over the door. Because the death angel passing by, they too would be killed. And that's why. The firstborn deserves to die because of sin. Because that's the way I look. That's why it is. We must sacrifice it. It belongs to God. And what he says instead, though, you must redeem them. You can't, the animals, if you don't want to sacrifice, if you don't want to redeem them, you will break its neck. It says, all right, let me go forward. Remember this day in which he came out of Egypt from the house of bondage. Like I said, the house of bondage, it's a picture of sin. Coming out of sin. Coming out of the bondage to Satan. That's the thing. We are freed from sin to serve a new master. So slavery is evil when it is entered into involuntarily. But when you enter into it voluntarily, it can be good. Being the Lord's slave has done nothing but benefit me. Because he not only he made me his slave, you know why? So he can make me his son. In that I am obedient as a slave, he will promote me like Abraham's servant who was going to be his heir. I have no right to inherit with God. It's funny when I read that open at the womb. I remember thinking to myself, I wonder if abortions count. Just because I'm not if that's the case, I'm not the firstborn. For strength, the Lord brought you out of this place. Not that it matters anymore, because it's like, and also, of course, Christ was firstborn. Her firstborn son. It's very explicit. Mary brought forth her firstborn son, and called his name Jesus. He opened the womb. He was sanctified. He was redeemed, of course, according to the law. But he also ended up being the sacrifice. That's why the Passover lamb had to be firstborn. Was it? Yeah. It was a firstling, right? Or was it? No, it was a lamb of the goats. Did it have to be? I'm going to go back and find out. That's an important question to me. Back a little more. I should go back to the part where he's talking about the blood. Oh, well, there it is. Okay. A male of the first year. So I don't think it technically had to be a firstling, but in this law of the firstlings, all the firstlings belong to God anyways. And they could either be, I believe, redeemed, which meant bought back with money. In that sense, because it's not a sacrifice for sin per se. It's like because it's not a sacrifice for sin. It's saying because of sin, this should happen. This is mine. All the firstborn. And I said, Paul, I don't know if they're making a sense. Not so much sense. It makes sense to say because of sin, but it doesn't explicitly say sin. And you're right, it doesn't explicitly say. But from my thinking, like it just seems like that just makes a lot of sense. As far as like why the firstborn? Well, because they deserve to die too. All your cattle deserve to die like in Egypt. Remember what happened in Egypt? And it's part of remembering what happened in Egypt, how all the firstborn were killed. So we have to continually redeem the firstborn. Because, like I said, not just because of memory, I think also there's a subtext, which is a New Testament subtext, which is because of sin. And it's not explicitly said here, I guess, but I do think it's there as a New Testament. Like I said, the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy, right? So when I look at the Old Testament prophecy and also the Old Testament law, I read it having on the what would I call it? Not blinders, but rather the Christ tinted glasses. Okay, something like that. Yeah. By strength of hand, the Lord brought you out of this place. There shall no leavened bread be eaten. And ultimately, to be unleavened is to be unmixed with, with the things that men put into that pure word of God or that pure religion of God, they corrupt it and add nothing really much to it other than to puff it up and make it look bigger. Your religions get bigger looking and stuff, they wear long robes. There's all kinds of extra things they do that don't have any bearing and are unnecessary. And that, if you really need to get saved in a hurry, you could probably do without. You know what I mean? Like if you want to be, in order to be saved and nourished by God, you don't need all that leaven. That's why I was thinking about Mr. Catholicism is Christianity. And I thought that's my problem with the Catholic Church. It's just got so much leaven in it. Like I said, even if I went and joined the Catholic Church, I would join it as a complete heretic. But I think that there's a degree to which they don't throw people out like that because there's a lot of people who don't even believe. I suppose if you make a big enough stink, they'll toss you out. I mean, if you're being a problem maker, nobody should have. I wouldn't expect anyone to put up with someone who's being a troublemaker. I definitely don't. In my time when I've been in churches, I do not go there to be a troublemaker. I can't be. I don't know how to do that. I'm not good at it. But I often find that I just am trouble. Because like I said, I don't make trouble. I just cause it by my existence, apparently. And so because I have to, because inevitably there'll be things and then you try to correct and it's like, because of power and authority and all that stuff, or friendships and all that, the corruption sets in and people, and you're out and that's the way it is. Or it's just time to go. You came out this day in the month of Abib. We've talked about the whole thing. That's not a big point we're going to have to worry about. The month they came out. It shall be when the Lord shall bring thee into the land of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, which he sware unto thy fathers to give thee, a land flowing with milk and honey, that thou shalt keep this service in this month. 7 days you will eat. It's a feast of unleavened bread for 7 days. And the seventh day shall be a feast in the Lord. And it repeats, unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days. Sometimes people kind of make fun of the repetition in the scripture, like Monty Python, you shall eat it. But like I said, when you consider how poorly the command is followed, the repetition is more than necessary. Is not even sufficient, I would say, actually, as far as, and it never would be. I mean, we can repeat things over and over again. If it enters not into men's hearts to do these things, then there's no amount of repetition that's going to make them do it. Like I said, truly, even in the law, without faith, you really have no way to perform it. That's why Jesus said the weightier matters of the law were judgment, mercy, and faith, because faith is implied in everything. Believe me, do the things I say. Because I don't doubt that by faith, they kept the feast. That's true. It's just in the faith that I know under the law of Christ, I don't have to keep that feast because I keep it in the Spirit. So, and then not only that, you don't let any leaven be seen. You definitely put it away. And thou shalt show thy son in that day, saying, tell your children, this is done because of that which the Lord did unto me when I came forth out of Egypt. And there's a lot of things in my life where I'll talk to my kids like, this is because God saved me. When I thought I was when God saved me this, and when God did this, and like the things the Lord has done for you. It is good to put them in remembrance. Even though, I'll tell you, for them, I gotta say, the repetition of the things is good, so that they can know your history. You don't want to be just without, like I said, my wife and I'm not about making my kids memorize scriptures, but we definitely read them and stuff. You know what I mean? It's like, but I don't want to make it grievous. I don't want to make it a chore. I don't want to make it like school. But I do believe in education. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of school. I consider school to be that factory environment that they put children in to ruin their lives. I know that's not the purpose, but that is what the outcome is. Now you say, well, Paul, it doesn't ruin everybody. Of course not. Kids are, people are, what do they call, resilient. And kids can go through a lot of things and come out okay. But, a lot of kids aren't. Like I said, I think ADHD is a disease that is actually school-born. I mean, it comes from going to school. It's not, there's actually nothing. Well, it's that and probably the awful food we're eating or something we might be injecting into ourselves. I don't know, but it didn't used to exist, so it didn't used to be like, oh, wow, there's a problem with kids. Wait, little boys can't pay attention and they're hyperactive. That's a disease. That's a disease called being male and young. I used to sit there in school with my leg going berserk. But because I was intelligent and able to pay attention, and actually a lot of times I didn't pay attention. I actually just read the school book, which was my saving thing because I learned a lot from the school. It was all right there. The teacher would be talking and I just read the book because I liked reading. And I think that was an out for me because I could be, and if called upon, I had the answers. I was very much, when they wanted an answer, I was very participatory because of that, because it was so boring and because I so much hated being there. I was trying, I think that's what made me not, but we didn't have Ritalin back then. We didn't have these drugs they put kids on to try to even out their temper so they can focus. We want to make them fit into this. We got all these square pegs. We got to cram them into the round holes. I mean, school is this round hole that we can't get these square kids into. So we have to make them fit instead of changing the school to fit the kids, which to me is like they did, the solution to the problem with kids in school is to drug the kids. I think our society is sick. Actually, it is literally sick. I know that's not just a thought of mine. I mean, that's thoughts of thousands of people who look at these things. society is very sick, but we're not really looking at the root causes. And I think a lot of it has to do with early childhood education. You know, it's things like sending kids off to preschool, sending them off to daycare, sending them off to school. You know, for 8 hours a day, children separated from their parents. You wonder why, as a teenager, they don't listen to you? They don't even know who you are. You know what I mean? If you're sending your kid in elementary, you know, I have to, you better be making time. When they're out of school, you know, like take them to a sport and be the coach. Everyone can't be the coach. That's why I like wrestling, because kind of every dad can be a wrestling coach. Yeah, I didn't know much about wrestling. I only took it in junior high, like as part of the gym class and all that. And I joined the team for a while, but I quit because I didn't like because the punitive. I didn't mind the wrestling part, but there was this punitive. When we lost our thing, we had to do these up downs for losing, which meant running in place. We already did up downs, but it was like a ton of them, and I was just like, I'm done. You know? That was what the purpose was, to weed out the quitters, and I quit. But I never let my kids quit. But we didn't do it punitive. We don't have real punitive, like, you lose, now you do all this work. You know why? Because I like to make working out should be a positive, not like I'm punishing you. That's the problem. I've always felt that, like, sprinting and doing these athletic feats as part of your training, it's just got to be taught to kids that this is necessary. This is going to make you stronger. Da 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 da. I don't go back, I'm punishing you. It's punishing enough on its own. Like, they feel the pain. You don't need to make it worse by telling them it's a punishment. That's why I always like, if I got to make a kid do something hard, I don't really want it to be like a form of punishment. As if I have to make them do something hard. You know what I mean? I have to make you do something hard. I can tell that from, like, this is what you got to tell your son, because instructing your children is very important to the Lord. And it's part of what sanctifies them in the Lord's sight, because they still have to come to the Lord on their own terms. You know, I'm not the mediator between Christ and my children. I'm not that at all. But there is this sanctifying power of my faith and my wife's faith over our children. The New Testament speaks of it, not in those exact terms, but it says they are sanctified. There's a sanctification of them. It doesn't mean they're perfect, but I think what you have is a great opportunity to work with the Lord to raise up children that are pleasing to him. And that's the thing. If you what I was going to say is, like, the things I tell them about the past and my past are important. But I said the essential thing is that I raise them right within the context of my Christian faith, to do right, and to give them the tools to analyze situations and know how to navigate their way through life, to know right from wrong, and to not bring, you know, like, the way my children behave very much reflects on me, as far as I'm concerned. I both, what is the word I want? I exhort and have expectations of them, you know, but also I have peace because I know ultimately I am not them, but they are part of my work. And so how the world receives them and how the world perceives them is important, because it's a reflection upon me. And the scriptures agree. You know, that's why it says a bishop must be blameless, the husband of one wife, having ruled his own house well. Ruled it, you know, if he doesn't know how to keep his own house in subjection, that means I tell my wife, you don't argue with me. You entreat me. And she doesn't. You know? She doesn't. If ever it starts inadvertently, because she's never intentionally started an argument with me, I know that about my wife. You know, I'll remind her and she stops. You know, because we don't want to have arguments. I'm the boss. That's all. Otherwise, why would she marry me? Women don't like guys that can boss around. You like a guy you can boss around? What kind of weirdo are you? You don't want a man? Of course, everyone wants a man she can lean on, a man she can trust in. But then at the same time, these women today are so confused. I want to be a girl boss too. It's like, forget it. You're not a boss. You're not fitted for it. You don't have the temperament. It's a male thing. That's why even women hate being under girl bosses. They hate it. Female bosses, they don't know how to be men properly, and so they end up messing it up. And it makes, every time I got fired, it was by a female, either the action of some female in the workplace who thought they were my boss, or by my actual boss. And it was also unreasonable, and I was glad to go. I don't want to be under the oppression of females, because they're not good at being in charge. That's part of why our country is doomed, by the way. Because through the compassion of the female, we will never make the reforms necessary to save ourselves. We will just compassion our way to death. Because they're going to keep voting for stupid things and not paying attention. And I think a long time, if the men were in charge, like I agree with the guy who said we should never have given up the patriarchy. I don't want to oppress women, not at all. But their oppression is far worse. Because, like I said, like if a woman becomes president, she's gonna be so god awful intent on proving what a man she can be. We'll probably have, that's that may be what we get for World War III. That may be what we end up with. It's way off track, but whatever. Not off track. It's raise your children right. Wives, obey your husbands. It's all right. A sign upon thy hand. Well, we'll pick this up next time. Because I'm not. Whatever, we're in the midst of this. Let me see. Sign upon thy hand, verse 9. Okay. 10, 11, 12. That's fine. I'm glad a lot of this is still here. Okay, we'll talk more about all these subjects. The firstborn tomorrow. That's okay. We got through things. We got some important topics we discussed. I love the way the Spirit inspires me to go off into different directions, though I hope it isn't tedious. My wife always says she likes it, and since she's the primary audience, I'll just say that's probably, she would say, good enough, right? So anyways, thanks for joining me. I look forward to being back in tomorrow and all week, God willing, right? Until then, remember the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy, and I will be back.
Saith unto me, weep not, behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David,
He
hath
lives.
prevailed to open the book, and to loose the 7 seals thereof. And I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the throne, and of the 4 beasts, and in the midst of the elders, stood a Lamb, as it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God, sent forth into all the earth. And he came and took the book